On October 4th, 2013, hockeysfuture.com posted this top 50 list of the top 50 NHL-affiliated prospects. I wanted to have some fun, take a look at this list, and produce a video for the top 10 selections, and recall, all the way back in 2013, who Hockey's Future thought were the best prospects in the game. This is the top 10 NHL prospects from 7 years ago, according to hockeysfuture.com. Number 10, we have ourselves a guy who was drafted 3 years before this article was published in Evgeny Kuznetsov of the Washington Capitals. The little paragraph here says that Capitals fans are expecting an immediate top 6 player out of Evgeny Kuznetsov, who had just been spending some time in the KHL developing after being drafted, and who took a very long time to get into the NHL after being selected. However, for 2013-14, he spent another year in the KHL and came over to the Washington Capitals later on. 2 seasons later, and Evgeny Kuznetsov had 77 points in 82 games, and now is a very, very good player for a Washington Capitals team who's relying on him more than ever before. Number 9, we have ourselves a recently drafted player. This guy was taken 3rd overall in the previous entry draft before this article's publication. We have ourselves from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Jonathan Drouin. He's a guy who, after getting drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning, people were saying he could be amazing. This guy always grew to 90, 100 point potential in NHL 14, and he would always become really, really good. Eventually, though, Drouin didn't really pan out in the way that Lightning fans thought that he would. He was really good in junior before coming over to the NHL, but 32 points in 70 games played for the Lightning, spending some time in Syracuse, and eventually having a breakout year in 2016-17, things were looking up for the young French Canadian. But then he was traded to Montreal, and now he's here. Drouin has been slowed down by injuries, but there is still some very good potential out of this player. He's 25 years of age, so the possibilities of him getting better and breaking past that 15 points he had this previous season definitely does exist. Next up, it's number 8 on the list. We have ourselves a guy from the Florida Panthers. We're sticking in Florida this time for Aleksander Barkov, the 2nd overall pick in the 2013 NHL entry draft. Barkov is a guy who many people thought could become a very, very good player, and frankly enough, he did. He made the NHL immediately after being drafted, posting up 24 points in 54 games. Now, he's a guy who's coming off of a 96-point campaign, and we talked about the trade rumors with him yesterday on how people are saying that he's going to New York when really that's not going to happen at all. But Barkov, to me, at $5.9 million is one of the biggest steals of a contract in this league, and he's going to win a few Selkies down the line. Once Patrice Bergeron gets out of that conversation, it's going to be Barkov and Barkov only. Number 7 on the top 10 prospects in 2013 is Dougie Hamilton of the Boston Bruins. Dougie Hamilton is a guy who I always seem to think is older than he really is. He's 26 right now, which means that back when this article was published, he was turning 19. In fact, when this article was published in October of 2013, Hamilton already had 42 games of NHL experience with the Bruins. He then played 64 games the next season and had 25 points. Give it a few years and a few trades later, and all of a sudden Dougie Hamilton is a consistent 40, 45, 50 point defender in this league. He was just under a point per game this season, and he is a very, very, very good offensively producing D-man. Next up on this list, it's the number 6 spot. We have ourselves the St. Louis Blues' Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, just like Evgeny Kuznetsov, Tarasenko was in that weird boat where people didn't really know when he was going to make the NHL. He was drafted in 2010, so this was 3 years after he was drafted when the article was published, and he had just finished up a 38-game campaign with the St. Louis Blues. This was finally the time for Tarasenko to come into the NHL and show off what made him such a highly touted Russian player. Give it a few years and all of a sudden, he's a 40-goal guy in the National Hockey League, and a consistent 65, 70-point scorer as well. He was sidelined for pretty much all of this season, which really did suck. But once Tarasenko comes back, I have no doubt that he's going to remain as one of the best goal scorers in the game today, and he definitely does have potential to win himself a few pieces of hardware as the years go on. Next up, it's the number 5 spot where we have a guy who was drafted after Barkov and after Jonathan Drouin. It's Seth Jones of the Nashville Predators. He was taken 4th overall this year, and he made the NHL immediately after getting drafted. He had 25 points in 77 games played with the Predators in his first season, and a few years down the line, he eventually became a 57-point guy in 78 games with the Blue Jackets. That Ryan Johansson trade was a really weird one, but Seth Jones today is one of the best defenders in the National Hockey League, and somebody who a lot of people can definitely see why he was as highly touted as he was back in 2013. We've broken into the top 5 already, so let's go to the 4th spot here. Sticking with the 2013 NHL entry draft, who better than to talk about but the first overall pick of that year, Nathan MacKinnon in the Colorado Avalanche. Nathan MacKinnon was a first-round pick that a lot of people saw sky-high potential within, and in his first NHL year, he had 63 points in 82 games. This guy was crazy good right out of the gate. Give it a few years, and all of a sudden Nathan MacKinnon is coming off of 97 points in 2018, 99 points in 2019, and 93 points in 69 games this season. He's only 24. Nathan MacKinnon is 24 years old and already with 3 straight 90-point campaigns. This year, he could honestly get to 100 if the season continues. Nathan MacKinnon is one of the best players in the world. Now in the top 3, the 3rd best NHL prospect is the Edmonton Oilers' Nail Yakupov. The guy was 1st overall in 2012, and he played 2012-2013 with the Edmonton Oilers, except that season was very, very short because of the lockout. So technically, they still considered him a prospect, even though he already had an extended amount of time in the NHL. But when you put it like this, and you rank the 1st overall picks against each other, Nail Yakupov, 1st overall in 2012, against Nathan MacKinnon, 1st overall in 2013, there was a legitimate argument to be made that Yakupov was a better quote-unquote prospect, but at the same time, we all know how Yakupov turned out. He really wasn't all too great. This wasn't a great pick at all, and now, taking a look at it, Edmonton. Into the top 2, though, the 2nd best prospect in the NHL is Jonathan Huberdeau, a guy also playing for the Florida Panthers. Now, Huberdeau is a guy who was taken in that 2011 draft. That's the same draft that Dougie Hamilton was in. And before this article was published, Huberdeau played a 48-game stint with the Florida Panthers, getting 31 points. He was looking to become a really good, solid left-wing player, and a guy who the Florida Panthers could definitely build around alongside of Aleksander Barkov. Huberdeau recently had 92 points in 82 games, and this season had 78 points in 69 games. He's an absolute beast, and a guy who was on top of the world before the hockey season came to a pause. Huberdeau today may not be as good as Barkov, some people could debate about that, but the Florida Panthers legitimately have 2 very, very good players at their disposal here. 2 90-point potential caliber athletes, and that, to me, is very, very good. Now on to number 1, the best prospect in the NHL, and you know this because it's in the thumbnail, it's Alex Galchenyuk of the Montreal Canadiens. Where do we begin? Galchenyuk was drafted in 2012 by Montreal, and he only played 2 games in his draft year. He was out the entire time, but he was still so highly touted. Eventually, though, once this article was written, Galchenyuk did indeed have NHL experience. 48 games played, he had 27 points. And the next few seasons, Galchenyuk was seen as a potential star, a guy who would lead Montreal back to the promised land, and a guy who they can definitely build the franchise around. His best season with Montreal saw him getting 56 points, but eventually he was traded to Arizona in exchange for Max Domi, and now Galchenyuk is out here getting 17 points in 45 games with the Penguins and 7 points in 14 games played with the Wild. It hasn't been a great career for Galchenyuk in comparison to what people believed he could become, but he was still seen as a very highly touted player, which is why he's number 1 here on this list. If you have any comments about what we're talking about here, talk about the players, talk about the order, talk about the careers of the guys we discussed here today, comment it all down in the comment section below. I am looking forward to reading all of that. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.